Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest book in the Deikan series, Volume 3, is now out. If you'd like to learn more about some of Japan's most haunted and dangerous spots, then this is the book for you. You can find all sorts of abandoned shrines, hospitals, parks, and even lesser-known places you wouldn't even think could be haunted. That's Deikan, the most haunted locations in Japan, Volume 3, out now. This week, we're looking at several tales of terrifying dolls. Haunted dolls, cursed dolls, dolls that might not even actually be dolls. First up, a man walks past a park bench on his way to work every day and the same woman is always sitting there. But who is she, and why is she always there? Rain, hail, or shine? Find out in Woman on the Bench. On a bench in a park, there was a woman who sat with her back to the street every morning. No matter the weather, that woman sat on that park bench every single day. She never held an umbrella if it rained, nor did she even wear a raincoat. The man never saw her face, but she seemed to be young and her clothes expensive. Yet, she didn't seem to mind them getting drenched in the rain. Nobody ever approached the woman, nor did he ever see anyone talking to her either. But on his way home, the woman sitting on the bench would be gone. Eventually, the seasons changed, and as the trees began to lose their leaves, that woman was still sitting on the park bench. Her clothes had barely changed at all. The businessman glanced sidelong at her as he walked to work. The woman's scarf had blown off in the wind, falling near her feet inside the park. Understanding that the woman wasn't quite normal, the man quickly picked the scarf up and intended to leave just as quickly. But then, he glanced at the woman and almost fell over. She had no face. There was just a black hole, like her face had been gouged out. But on the verge of screaming, the man took another closer look. She's a mannequin? That's right. He wasn't looking at the desecrated body of a dead woman, but rather a mannequin whose face had been carved out. The man was astonished to find out that the woman he had thought was strange for so long was actually a doll. But even when he turned around after leaving the park, it looked like that woman might move at any moment, even though he knew full well that it was just a doll. The next day, the woman was no longer seen sitting on that bench. It was as though somebody had been watching them the entire time. A doll can't walk by itself. Who readied the mannequin like that, gouged its face out, and then secretly put it on the park bench every day? And for what possible reason? Or was there no meaning to it at all? After that, he never saw the woman sitting on the park bench again. But parks are everywhere, and someone could be sitting on a park bench at any place, at any time. In this next story, a young boy breaks a doll he finds at a shrine, but it seems it doesn't end there. How is he going to make up for this cruel act? Find out in What Are You Going to Do? This happened to me when I was in elementary school. There was a small mountain behind our school, and there was a famous local shrine on it where my friends and I always used to play hide and seek on our way home from school. After the sun had set and we were done playing for the day, we all got back together and then suddenly I noticed an old Japanese doll next to the shrine's donation box. Looking back on it now, maybe it was there for a memorial service or something. "That's scary," one of my friends said. I wanted to show them all how brave I was, so I tossed a rock at it. I hit it square in the face with my first throw. The face broke and fell inside. With the doll's face now pitch black, because of the hole, a strange atmosphere settled over the area. Then everyone screamed and ran. Being kids, we quickly forgot about it on the way home, and when I got back, I watched TV and ate dinner. The doll was completely gone from my mind. As the night wore on, I got into bed. I lived alone with my mother, so we slept in the same room. I don't know how much time passed, but at some point during the night, a small voice woke me up. Hey. 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 It was my mother next to me. She was facing the other way as she slept, but I thought she was talking to me. What? I said. Hey. 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 She kept facing the other way and didn't turn around. Because she was whispering, I was scared. So, to distract myself from how I felt, I tapped her on the shoulder. Mom, what is it? She muttered in her sleep and then rolled over. Huh? She was still sleeping. Was she talking in her sleep then? I thought. But then suddenly there was a loud bang, like something being hit. But the sound came from my mother's face. Then, with another bang, her face looked just like that doll I'd seen earlier in the day, with her hair lining it. Her face was nothing but a round hole as it fell back and then inside her. What are you going to do about this? A voice said from the hole in her face. I screamed. Unable to even think, I passed out. The next morning, everything was back to normal. My mother was already awake and making breakfast. I don't know whether it was a dream I had or it really happened, but I think that doll was angry at me. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. An urban legend spreads around school that a creepy doll was found in a nearby house that burnt down. But when people see it in various places around town, bad things start happening. Why? Find out in The Doll with Missing Parts. I heard this story when I was in the 3rd grade of elementary school. At the time, a student's house burned down and someone died. I think it was their grandmother, but they weren't a classmate of mine, nor did I even know their face, so all I heard were the rumours. However, that half-burnt-down house was on my way to school. For some reason, it was left as is for over a year, and when I was in the 5th grade, I first heard a scary story related to that house. Apparently, a boy from one of the neighbouring classes who easily got carried away with things went into that abandoned house without permission and experienced something strange there. I'll call him A. He transferred to a different school in the 4th grade, so he was already long gone, but it seemed his story was still being passed around a year later. A went to the half-burnt-down house with some other bratty kids, and apparently in the toilet or bathroom they found a doll. It was an old plastic Kewpie doll. But this doll was missing an arm, and there wasn't otherwise anything special about it, so A was the only one who saw it. But after A transferred to another school after seeing the doll, the story took on a life of its own. When I was in junior high, people were still talking about that doll for some reason. One girl was attacked at the toilets of a public park, and for a while after that, the toilets were closed. When they finally opened again, for some reason, people apparently found a Kewpie doll with one arm missing in the disabled toilet. It wasn't something I saw or heard directly, so I only knew the rumours, but I couldn't get the image of this one-armed doll out of my head. 3 years later, when I was in high school, I went camping with 3 friends during the summer holidays. We spent 2 uneventful nights camping on the beach where we went swimming, made curry and rice, and played with fireworks. We rode our bikes home, and on the way, I saw a canned drink and some dried flowers on the side of the road by the guardrail. I was curious, but when we stopped at a nearby convenience store for a break, nobody spoke about what we'd just seen. Several years later, I started work and left my hometown. One year, I returned for the first time in a while for New Year's and caught up with some friends from high school. We got together for drinks and had a bit of a reunion for the first time in 10 or so years. C was also there, and he was one of the guys who went camping with me that summer. We drank late into the night, and then 3 of us decided to visit a nearby shrine for the traditional first shrine visit of the year. I think it was C who suggested it, and it was talk of D, who had died in an accident during university, that started it. That summer we went camping, D saw something strange at that side of the accident. He said it was a headless doll. That was the first I'd heard of that, and suddenly I sobered up real quick. I didn't see anything, but apparently E also saw a doll. But E said he saw a baby doll that was missing a leg. During a drive late one night, E was driving when he had an accident, and D died instantly. E broke both legs, C said. I didn't actually see that doll, but for some reason I feel like I did. How about you? I didn't know how to answer, so I looked down at the ground and stayed silent. But then some words came to me. I feel like one day I'll see that doll too. A doll gifted for a new baby seems innocent enough at first, but is there some life hiding behind those eyes? Find out in The Baby Doll. This story isn't deathly terrifying or anything, but it did still scare me. After my parents got married, a married couple they were friends with gave them a baby doll to celebrate my birth. The doll was around the size of a 2-year-old child, with light brown hair that was almost blonde. Its arms and legs had joints that could move, and you could change its clothes as well, so you could play with it like you were actually taking care of it. It was like a big version of what we now call Popo-chan. But this doll's face wasn't as cute as Popo-chan. It had a rather Western look to it, and was kind of scary. And whenever you put it down, its eyes with terribly long eyelashes would close. For as long as I could remember, this doll scared me. I was probably afraid of it because it wasn't very cute. But wherever you put this doll in a room, it was so big that it had a large presence, so I didn't like it, and I was afraid of it. Around the time I started the 2nd grade, my parents had to move for work, and so we moved to a new house. I got my own room for the first time, but the door was warped or something, so if you wanted to close it properly, you had to really slam it shut hard and push against it. It was really noisy too. We put that scary doll next to the hard-to-close door in my room, even though it scared me day after day. One day, several years after we had moved into that house, I was in my room with the door half open. When I got up to go to another room and approach the door, suddenly, it started to close by itself. Was it the wind? I thought. But as I reached out for the doorknob, suddenly I turned to look at the doll next to it. That doll's hand was moving at the same speed that the door was closing. For a moment, I didn't understand what was going on, but then I was so scared that I couldn't move. Oh crap, I thought, and I flung the door open as hard as I could before it closed, and then ran to my mother. Panicking, I explained what had just happened and how I was scared of the doll. I was panicking so much that my mother laughed at me and moved the doll to another room. But the doll took up quite a bit of space, and I was so scared of it that, in the end, my parents moved it to my grandparents' house on my father's side for safekeeping. Even now, I can find that doll in their shed if I go looking for it. But I'm too scared to get rid of it, so it's still there. Even now, I still can't forget the strange squeaking sound of that door as it closed, and how scared I was when I saw the doll's hand moving with it. This abandoned doll seems to take a liking to the first person who shows it kindness. But what's really going on? Find out in The Lurking Doll. It started with something trivial. Late one night, I visited the convenience store, and on my way home, I saw something on the ground. Looking closer, it was a doll lying face down. I didn't know how long it had been there for, but while its clothes were dirty, its face was clean and not broken. Thinking a local kid must have dropped it, I picked it up and sat it next to a nearby telephone pole. But after that, I often saw that same doll when I was on my way home. It was always in a random spot, and it was always sitting there, looking at me. It's true that it was creepy, but it wasn't like in ghost stories where it gradually gets closer and closer to your house. So I just did my best not to look at it as I passed by. One day when I got home, I had a thought. Hey, I didn't see that doll today. Right after that, things immediately took a turn for the worse. When I opened the door, there was the doll, lying face down at my feet. Honestly, I was so surprised that I thought my heart might stop, but I couldn't just leave it inside my house like that. So I sat it outside by the front door so I could deal with it in the morning. The next day, that doll was still there, but now there was a memo next to it saying, "I love you." The letters looked childlike, or like an adult had written them messily. Either way, it was creepy, so I put the doll next to the telephone pole by the local rubbish area, and then went to work. After that, whenever I got home each night, the doll was there by my feet at the front door. And day by day, its face got dirtier and more chipped, as did its fingers, as it started to look worse and worse. It was like something straight out of a horror movie, and honestly, it wasn't very good for my mental health. I thought about taking it to a temple on my day off as I dropped it by that same telephone pole near the rubbish area, like I'd been doing each and every day. And then, when I started walking, suddenly, I heard a car braking. It seemed a cat had picked up the doll and ran across the road before getting hit. The day had barely even begun, and I'd already seen something terrible, I thought as I went to work. When I got home late that night, I opened the door and found part of the doll's head, covered in blood, at my feet. And after that, each day, a piece of that doll appeared at my door. Around the time I thought that all the parts had finally appeared, I walked home sadly and found a note by my feet at the door. I wish you were dead. A man out jogging hears some strange voices coming from under a bridge, but there he finds something utterly unexpected. And the story only gets worse from there. Find out why in Arguing Voices. I was jogging along the riverbank near my house one evening when I heard voices coming from beneath the nearby railway bridge. It sounded like a man and a woman arguing. Curious, I went down the slope to have a look, but nobody was there. Finding that strange, I went all the way under the bridge and looked around, but still I couldn't see anyone. I definitely heard those voices. It wasn't just my imagination. Hoping that somebody hadn't fallen into the river, I turned to look at the water. But then, I heard voices whispering behind me. We can just take him, yeah? No, I already told you, not yet. Why? Hey, come on, why? My heart pounding, I turned around and in the roughly 50-centimeter space between the bottom of the bridge and the bank, there were two dolls looking at me. They looked like Hina dolls. Holy crap, I thought, and immediately ran away. But as I took off running, I heard a deep voice right behind me as something grabbed my ankle. No, he'll do just fine. I screamed in surprise and took off running again. Surprisingly, the grip on my ankle let go. And just like that, I ran all the way home again. When I got back, I looked at my ankle and saw numerous stiff yellowed hairs wrapped around it. I couldn't even cut them with scissors or a cutter, so I had to slice through them with a kitchen knife. A month later, a child was drowning near that same spot, and their parents jumped in to help them. All died. Local rumors said that the bodies had been found with hairs coming out of them. I don't go jogging anymore. A group of friends head to a mansion for a test of courage, and there find a strange doll. Is it trying to tell them something, or... Find out in French Doll in the Fridge. When I was living life to the fullest, I decided to sneak into an abandoned house for a test of courage in Himeji with two of my friends. For some reason, whenever I was with the two of them, strange things always happened. This abandoned house was just like a Western mansion, and its huge entrance was dim and dusty. We made our way straight for the kitchen, talking about how we should find something to eat. Once we got there, we looked through the shelves and such, but of course, there was nothing there. Damn, this place really is empty, I muttered. And then finally, I opened the fridge. Inside was a doll with blonde hair and large eyes. An old French doll was just sitting there, right in the middle. Holy crap! What a terrible joke, I muttered, honestly surprised by the sight of it. Somebody must have put it there as a joke. Who the hell would put a French doll in the fridge? But we didn't want to be the only ones frightened by such a bad joke, so we decided to leave the doll there to scare the next people who came in, and then close the fridge door. Then we snuck into the large room with a fireplace. There was a huge fireplace in the wall facing the door, and there was still a desk and a sofa in there too. We poked through the fireplace to see if we could find anything interesting, and in the ashes, we found something strange. It almost looked like a headless body. The clothes had burnt off, but it appeared to be a French doll. When the three of us saw that, naturally, we got chills. Hey, let's go home. But the moment we turned to the door, suddenly my entire body broke out in goosebumps. The door, which we'd left open, was now for some reason half closed, and right at eye level, there was the burnt head of a French doll nailed to it. That most definitely wasn't there when we first entered the room. At that point, I couldn't stop thinking about the doll we'd left in the fridge. I felt kinda bad for the burnt doll, so the three of us talked it over and decided to take the other one out of the fridge. We went back to the kitchen and opened the fridge door, but the doll that was supposed to be there was gone. I was the one who closed the fridge door earlier, and I was also the one who opened it now. It hadn't been touched in the meantime. The three of us fled silently from the abandoned building like rabbits, and it wasn't until the house was finally out of sight that we were able to breathe again. When strong winds blow the shutters off an empty apartment window, the people living across notice something very strange inside. Is it really what they think it is? Or is the truth even stranger? Find out in Deserted Apartment. There's an apartment building across from our house. It's an old 2-story building with 8 apartments in all, but I've only ever seen people in the 2 corner apartments on the first floor. Our house faces the veranda side, but the sliding shutters are always shut, except for those at both ends. My parents said that when they moved here 30 years ago, only the apartment on the left was occupied, but a few years later, someone apparently moved into the one on the right as well. But in the several decades or so since then, nobody else has ever moved in. The earthquake on March 11th. We didn't suffer any major damage, but the shutters on the left corner apartment on the second floor across from us started coming off. Several days later, they were still damaged and the real estate showed no signs that they were coming out to fix it. A few more days passed and one night was particularly windy. In the morning, I went outside to get the newspaper and I saw that the shutters on that apartment were now completely torn off, and instead, I could see a slightly dirty window. But I could also see inside through that window, and something was hanging from the roof. Hanging. It looked like a person. I woke my father up and dragged him outside to show him. "You're right. Maybe we should call the police," he said. But then he stopped. Could such a thing really happen in a room that hadn't been used in 30 years? Did it just look that way because the window was dirty? It would be embarrassing if we made a big fuss over nothing. There was an old ad on the building advertising for new tenants. It would probably be better to call the phone number on it and have them take a look. It was just before 6 a.m. We didn't think anyone would answer, but it would be better to call sooner rather than later. And so we called, but nobody answered. We were rather worked up, however, so we kept trying for several minutes. And then, someone finally answered. "Yes? Who is it?" they said. "Sorry to call you so early," I said. "Is this the real estate agency? I live across from apartment name, and, the shutter on the second floor corner apartment, the one on the left from our house, came off in the wind and we can see inside. It appears that somebody is hanging in there." "Eh? Okay. Have you contacted the police?" "No? I see. That's okay. There's no need to." "Yes, thank you for calling us. We'll head out right away." A few minutes after my father left the house, someone from the real estate agency showed up. He was a short, pudgy man who looked to be around 60 or so. "Are you the one who called? Thank you for alerting us. You see, long ago, I hung a doll in there as a joke, and it never got taken down. No, I'm sorry, truly. I'll fix the shutter right away. I'll come back tomorrow with a proper apology for you." "No, it's fine. Let's go inside. Thank you." The man forced his way into our house before I could stop him. So, it was a doll. Well, I suppose now that he said that, it did look like one. Curious, I looked over at the window, and two old guys stepped out of a car parked in front of the apartment with a ladder. They climbed onto the veranda of that apartment on the second floor, then fixed the shutter and nailed over the top of it with boards. It was over just like that, and then they left. I lost interest and quickly got ready for work. But that night, someone from the real estate returned with a gift of cakes. My mother answered the door, but it seemed he wanted to talk directly to me. "Thank you for calling us this morning. If you didn't, then someone might have called the police. Then all sorts of terrible rumors would start circulating. Seriously, thank you so much. We'd appreciate it if you could keep this to yourself. As I said before, we don't want any terrible rumors going around." 2 months passed after that, and thanks to the damage from the weather, the apartment across from us is now scheduled to be torn down this summer. The tenants at both ends of the building are also apparently moving out. The building is so old that demolishing it wouldn't be all that strange, but the timing of it is all too perfect. "Isn't it weird?" I asked my father. "Don't pry too much. It's better not to get involved," he replied. Is that doll still hanging in that apartment even now? Or did they carry it out during the night? Well, I don't intend to start prying now. And finally this week, a tale of loss and grieving that's warped by a doll that may or may not have ulterior motives. Find out why in Chizue. Apparently, my father had a younger sister. That would make her my aunt, but she suddenly died a few months after I was born. They don't know why. After losing the daughter she had waited so long for, my grandmother fell into a deep depression. Unable to watch his wife suffer any longer, my grandfather bought her a French doll, and my grandmother named it Chizue, the same as her beloved daughter. She stroked the doll's hair every day, kept it clean, never let it leave her side, and she even slept with it. But that all changed when my younger sister was born. My grandmother was beyond happy to have another girl in the family. Both my parents work, so my grandmother lovingly took care of her instead. She looked after me too, of course. And so, her beloved Chizue no longer spent her time by my grandmother's side, but was placed in the altar room instead. By the altar, in the empty altar room. My grandparents often made me go there before dinner to give thanks to my ancestors, and it was a dark, cold, and creepy room. When I was in the upper grades of elementary school, I went into the room like always to offer some sacred sake, and I put my hands together in prayer before the altar. At that moment, I felt someone standing behind me. I turned around, but nobody was there. The only thing I could see was, as usual, Chizue in her pink dress. At the time, I was a little scared and at an impressionable age, so without thinking I said, "What? You got a problem? Come on then." What an idiot I was. I went back to the living room and told my family that Chizue was glaring at me. My grandmother blew her top. I'd never seen her get so angry before. She was so upset that my father got angry as well, and then he slapped me. I started crying. I apologized, and for the moment, that was that. The problems began a few days later. I think it was a day off, but the altar room was oddly bright. When I went in to offer the sacred sake I had forgotten to do the night before, Chizue wasn't in her usual spot. She had fallen to the tatami mats below, and her hand had fallen off. Honestly, I thought she had crawled off so she could do something to me. Scared, I ran back to my family in the living room. My grandmother was there, and I thought she might get angry at me again, but I was so scared that I told her what happened anyway. I wasn't acting normal, so she must have been worried, because she got up and came to the altar room with me. This time, Chizue was sitting in her usual spot. Her hand was attached as well. I felt like I'd been caught in a lie, so I was about to apologize when my father came in. "Ah, my bad. I knocked it over. I fixed it on my way to the toilet," he said. My father was the one who did it? He burst into laughing at me crying over the misunderstanding. But this time around, my grandmother comforted me, and the situation ended without incident. But that night, after my grandmother went to sleep, my father came to my room. "So, about that doll. I'm the one who put it back. But I didn't knock it over. You are telling the truth, aren't you?" According to him, he heard me making a loud noise as I ran out of the altar room, so he went to check and saw Chizue lying on the ground. Thinking it would be bad if others saw her like that, he quietly put her back in her spot. But strangely, my father said that her hand was still attached. How did she fall? And how did her hand get back on? I was so scared that I started skipping out on placing the sacred sake in the room. I'd take the sake, wait in the guest room for a few minutes, and then return to the living room. I think maybe 6 months passed with me skipping out on the sacred sake. And then, my younger sister died. She had just barely started elementary school. They said she died because of an unknown high fever. Her temperature suddenly rose, she was hospitalized, and then that was that. I thought that maybe it was because I hadn't been putting out the sacred sake, but I didn't say anything to my parents or grandmother about it. I felt guilty, you know? My sister died, and it was my fault. But then my mother started saying that it was Chizue's fault that my sister died. She said that just before my sister passed, she cried out, "Chi-chan!" She didn't have any friends by that name, And if we had to guess, then she was likely referring to that strange doll. And because I'd made a fuss about that doll in the past as well, my mother got upset and said she would throw it out. There was a huge fight at the funeral about it. After that, my parents no longer got along, and my mother returned to her parents' house. My father silently threw himself into work, and my grandmother cried each night holding Chizue. My father barely came home, and my grandmother cried all day. So it was around this time that I started looking after the house. Next, my grandmother started going senile. Looking back on it now, that's no surprise. All she did was eat, lock herself in her room holding that doll, and then cry herself to sleep. When I called her for dinner one time, she was already eating something. "What are you eating?" I asked. "Rice," she said. Huh? I thought, and when I looked at her face, golden strands of thread were hanging out of her mouth. In her hands, Chizue had been half pulled apart. I think that was the scariest moment of my life. I rushed to take the doll away from her. I tried talking to my mother about it, but she said she wanted nothing to do with my grandmother. I then spoke to my father and told him that he should take her to the hospital, but he said he was busy with work, so he couldn't. "You deal with her," he said. That was it. I was still in junior high at the time. After my sister died, our family lost their minds. When I thought about how it was my fault because I didn't put out the sacred sake, I had to do it. I stopped going to school. Thanks to my grandmother, Chizue was falling apart. She'd ripped out all her hair, taken off her clothes and cut her up. It's gross, but she was even smeared with excrement. Of course, I felt bad for the doll and took her away, but the next day, my grandmother had her again. I hid her in various places. In the shelf in the toilet, in my parents' bedroom, in the shoe boxes by the front door. But at night, my grandmother would scour the house looking for her, calling out, "Chizue! Chizue!" And every day, Chizue looked worse and worse for wear. I couldn't bear to see it any longer, so, with little options left, I tried putting her in my room. It must have been after 3 a.m. or so, but my grandmother calling for Chizue woke me up. My room was on the second floor, and I didn't think she'd be able to come up because she'd never been to the second floor since she started losing her mind. Relieved, I looked at the closet door where I put Chizue and it was open. I was sure I had shut it. I mean, it would be creepy if I left it somewhere I could see it. I put it in the closet so I wouldn't have to see it at night. I even put some plastic over it. But now, that plastic was on the ground. This was bad. Not to mention, it was Chizue. I panicked. I broke out in a sweat in bed. Should I pretend to be asleep or get up and check? I was terrified. And then I heard a creaking sound. The sound of a door opening. The door was near my bed, from which I could see the closet. But I was too scared to look at the door. Then, suddenly, I heard a voice. "Chizue! So you were here all along, huh?" Did Grandma come up here? I thought, and jumped out of bed. But there was nothing there. Not Chizue, and not my grandmother. Scared, I tried to go back to sleep again. I told myself that I was just imagining things. Chizue and my grandmother were dead in her room. I found her the next morning. She choked to death. They found strands of Chizue's hair and clothes in her throat, as well as the doll's eyeballs. Chizue's head was also in her mouth. You can't swallow that. In a bright room full of sunlight, my grandmother died like that. She didn't look happy. On the contrary, she looked to be in pain, her eyes bloodshot. She had also wet herself and was tightly gripping Chizue with one hand. Grandma's funeral was a plain one. She was cremated with Chizue. When it was time to place her in the grave, I saw the names of my ancestors who had already passed. And there, Chizue's name, my real aunt, was already written. It was strange to see. Now, this is the scariest story of all for me, but I think my Aunt Chizue's cause of death wasn't actually unknown. I think my grandmother actually choked her. I don't know why. Come to think of it, I didn't know any relatives from my father's side, and it turned out that my grandmother was estranged. I heard this from a relative who attended the funeral. When I asked why she wasn't arrested, if she really did that, they said that she just covered it up and then disappeared. This year marks the 4th anniversary of my grandmother's death. I haven't been to high school and I'm not working or anything either. After my grandmother died, I can't find the energy to do anything. I've been writing this story itself for 2 months now, and I finally finished it. I'm so tired, I just wish I could die like this too. If all of this is a curse from my Aunt Chizue, then maybe that's the reason I'm like this too. When I think she might be trying to destroy my existence, it honestly makes me laugh a little. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Deikan, the most haunted locations in Japan Volume 3, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.